Hello, everyone. Welcome to my PowerPoint presentation for my case study. My name is Hilary Armstrong. I work at North Cobb High School in Cobb County. I'm the CCC lead for the Geometry Y team, and I'm also the assistant coach for the swim team. The purpose of my case study is to look at my purpose for grading, take a hard look at my formative assessments, and use the data to direct my instruction. Again, I work at North Cobb High School. It is a traditional high school, 9th through 12th grade. I teach Geometry Y to mostly 10th graders. There's a few 9th graders that are mixed in, and then we have our 11th graders who are a step behind. And I also teach algebra support to 11th graders. The members of my team are Angela Milani and Marcy Nato. So my purpose for grading is to assess what my students have learned. I also have to grade things because of Cobb County expectations, and I also feel like it's a way I can communicate with students and parents. The way the gradebook is organized is that the CCC team meets and we decide how we want the different categories of grades to be weighted by percent, and then we have a software program that does our gradebook for us, and we enter those weights and categories into the software, and then the software will calculate our grades for us. One of the factors I consider when I'm grading is, can I give someone partial credit? Did they add wrong? Did they subtract wrong, but they have the general idea of the problem? So in situations like that, when it's just a number off or whatever, I always try to think about, could I give partial credit for this? Students are not involved with grading in any way. Teachers are the only ones that can actually grade work and determine different weights and things like that. The process for determining grades, again, the CCC's teams meet and determine how they want things weighted and what the grading categories are. And then we use the software program that I mentioned before to determine the grade. And then what I do is I look at the final grade and say, is this a good representation of the student's work for the semester? And then, you know, for example, I'll just take a look and go, well, this student usually is like a B student. Why do they have a C? So if it's something like they had one bad test grade and they're really close to the next higher level, I can go in and manually change the grade to something that is more befitting of that student's level of understanding. So my reflection for this, what I learned is that I can give a formative assessment and I don't necessarily have to grade it for, you know, and put it into the grade book. I can just grade it and look at the answers and see what the students missed and strictly use it for my own instructional purposes. The other thing I learned is for feedback, I tend to leave a little too much feedback on there, and I've learned through researching some things that I need to leave less feedback and more specific kinds of feedback. So how am I going to apply what I learned? I think I'm going to give more tickets out the door and smaller, more frequent formative assessments, and then take that feedback and use it to drive my instruction. And the other thing I learned about feedback that I provide on formative and summative assessments is that I need to leave less information on the quiz. I tend to write out the entire problem correctly so they can see all the steps, but what I learned was if I just put the formula down that they should have used or something like that, then have the students work the problem out for themselves, they retain the information better. So the CCCs are formed by teachers that teach the same subject. So all the geometry teachers are on one CCC, all the Algebra 2 teachers are on another, etc. So one of the expectations of our administration is that the CCC teams are formed to collect and examine data and then let that data drive instruction. That is just an expectation at our school. We have 3 positions on the CCC team. There's the lead, and I just kind of provide the agenda, and you know, if there's any action items, I go ahead and take care of that. There's a recorder who records the minutes of our meetings, and then we have a data monitor who makes sure that we all put our data into a spreadsheet, and then we discuss the data that's in the spreadsheet. We didn't have any barriers to completing the case study. Everything was contained within the classroom using formative assessments that we always use, and the data that we collected would be data that we would look at for anything else that we do. The role of the leaders at our school, each department has their own administrator, and so our administrator actually likes to sit in on the Geometry Y meetings. And so he's been present at all of our meetings during this time. And if there was anything that we needed to implement anything in the case study or implement anything else, our administration is very supportive and they will do whatever they can to make that happen. But we just didn't need anything to do this case study from our administration. So what I learned was that my team is a really great resource. We're all very experienced teachers and we're all good people to bounce ideas off of. And I also learned that we have a lot of the same educational beliefs. So what I'm going to apply is that I'm going to continue to utilize my strong CCC team, and I will also continue to discuss different strategies so we can make good decisions for our students. So my process for developing the formative assessments is I look at the content that we've covered, and then I choose or make up different problems that are representative of what we studied in class. The content area and standards for both assessments are listed here. One is finding arc length in areas of circles and sectors. That's all formulas. And then the second assessment was on volume formulas and using them forwards and backwards. So it's both were very formula driven. The learning intentions were for students to choose the correct choose the correct formula for each type of problem. And the success criteria would be students getting the answers correct, meaning they chose the right formula. The assessments, the first one was a 16-question multiple choice quiz, and the second one was a 2-question ticket out the door. So the data that was collected on both of those was mean, median, and mode. What did I learn about the formative assessments is that I would like to start giving them more frequently, and that it doesn't necessarily have to be a grade. Obviously, I'm going to grade it, but I don't have to put it in my grade book and possibly have it count against the student. So I'm going to apply this by giving more formative assessments over smaller chunks of information, and I may not choose to enter a grade in for every formative assessment that is given. I might give a little formative assessment and just collect the data and use it and not enter anything for a grade. So I calculated the mean, median, and mode for each period and each assessment. That's how the data was organized. And in our CCC team, it is a routine thing for us to look at the data that's collected, look at the students' individual scores, and look at the mean. And then as we're grading their quizzes and tests and everything else, we always kind of make a mental note of which ones did students miss most. So it's kind of an informal item analysis that we're doing. To provide feedback to students, I usually will write comments on their quiz or write down the formula that they should have used or work out the problem or put a smiley face on if they did good. And then I also like to devote class time to going over the quiz. So I'll give quizzes back and then I'll just go over any problem on the quiz that the students want to ask for, and then sometimes they're too shy to ask, so I'll go around and answer individual questions. My data summary is listed here. So the first formative assessment, second period, the mean was 87, median was 94, and mode was 100. Fourth period scores, the mean was 83.4, median was 94, and mode was 100. Now, the second formative assessment was only 2 questions, so these numbers look very different. The mean was 50%, the median was 50%, and the mode was 50% for second block. And then fourth block had a mean of 32, a median of 50, and a mode of 50. I learned that item analysis, and that should say mean, but I'm having editing issues, are probably the most informative types of data. Over here about how I was going to apply it, I will do item analysis, or I'm going to attempt to do item analysis on an occasional basis. Item analysis is very time consuming, so to do it for every type of assessment would take a lot of time, but I am going to try to do it more frequently, especially on a ticket out the door situation where it's just a couple of problems. So intervention, the challenges that we face were students choosing the wrong formulas, or they didn't use the formula correctly, or they didn't work their calculator correctly. The strategies that we're going to use for intervention and extension is we're going to take those problems that were most frequently missed and practice those. The extra practice is going to take place during warm-up every day. It could take place during class time, like when I go over all the questions on the quiz. And then it can also take place during SPEAR. SPEAR is a 40-minute time slot we have every day where students report to a different class period every day of the week. And that time is dedicated to remediation and extension. So we will utilize SPEAR to help remediate and extend. And then how will I know if those strategies worked? Well, the first formative and the second formative, there was about 4 days difference between. And then from the second formative to the final, there was about 5 days. And so hopefully during that time, we've remediated, and we did see a significant increase in the summative test scores. I learned that providing feedback is very important for students. Specific types of feedback are more beneficial than others. And my students actually said that they liked that I took all the time I did to go over the quizzes. So to apply what I learned, I'm going to continue to use class time to go over quizzes, and I'm going to work on providing more meaningful feedback. To summarize, what I learned is that I need to give a specific type of feedback, and I need to give a variety of formative assessments and more formative assessments. I also learned that I don't need to take every formative assessment as a grade and put it in the grade book. And then I need to give shorter formatives on less content and more frequently. Thank you.